Hey everyone, I'm Katie Martin. Welcome back to another episode of Create Your Character. Last episode I showed you how I sewed my pants for my hunter from Destiny 2. The cosplay I'm making is based on the Empyrean cartographer ornaments and inspired but not an exact match to the resilient Laurel shader. I'm still continuing this cosplay, and this episode I'll show you how I am making the shirt. I will include links and names to any tools or patterns I use in the description of the video. If you're a fan of Destiny or cosplay or even both like me, then stick around for this next tutorial.
Alright, the first thing that I'm going to do is cut out my pattern. The pattern I'm using is the McCall's M7839, and when you look at it, it's like this basic sweatshirt or turtleneck pattern, and it's kind of baggier, it's not skin tight, and this is the pattern I wanted to use because when looking at the reference pictures, you can look at the sleeves, and they're not really skin tight except for the one arm that's covered in armor, but the other one is kind of baggier, and this is going to make it easier with the armor and stuff because it's going to have room to move around, so that's why I chose this pattern. It's pretty straightforward, just cut out the pattern pieces and then put those pieces on the fabric and then cut out the fabric along the lines. Now that I've got my pieces cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start clipping some of them together. I'm using clips instead of pins when I can because I absolutely love clips. I usually end up stabbing myself when I use pins, so I like to use clips whenever I can. So I'm attaching the two back pieces to the front. And the reason I cut the back down the middle is because I want to add a zipper, because this fabric that I'm using isn't very stretchy, so the zipper is going to make it a whole lot easier to put on and off. Now that I've got my pieces clipped, I'm just going ahead and sewing the pieces that I've clipped. It's pretty straightforward. Just choose a seam allowance and then go down the line. This part here that I'm working on is actually the turtleneck part, so this is going around the neck, and I'm attaching this before I sew the back closed because it's going to be so much easier to attach when the back isn't closed. Now that the turtleneck part is on, I'm going ahead and pinning the back. Well, not pinning, clipping, I guess. And I can go ahead and sew the back closed. Again, it's pretty straightforward, just following my seam allowance until I get to the end. My shoulder really went in front of the camera here, and I am sorry. I will try to get better angles next time. Yeah, that's the end. Now I'm going to go ahead and press that seam open because this is where I'm adding the zipper, so I need to make sure that it is open, so attaching that zipper is going to be easy peasy. Pressing the top part here was kind of difficult because it's got a couple seams. So trying to fold those all open to press it was a little complicated. Took a little while, but it worked. Once it's pressed, I can put my zipper on the back. And I just lay it on top of that seam there, and then I'm pinning the zipper to the actual flaps of excess fabric, not to the actual shirt itself. I'm only attaching it to those little flappy things. I know the zipper is not the same color blue as the rest of the shirt, but it's going to be underneath armor and then underneath a cape, so I wasn't too concerned. The blues kind of look nice together. But anyways, once I got that zipper nice and pinned on there, I'm going to go ahead and sew it to those flaps of excess fabric, not to the actual shirt. I'm only sewing along the inside of the seam here. I had to use pins for this, and I always make sure that I remove the pins before I sew over them. I know some people sew right over their pins, but I have this fear that I'm gonna break my needle if I do that, so I just take them out before I sew over them. Putting in zippers used to be one of my biggest fears when it came to sewing, but it's really not that complicated, and I don't know why I was so scared for so long, but yeah, now I put them in quite frequently. Now I'm just going along the other side. I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's literally the same thing as what you just saw. And now that I've got the zipper sewn in, I'm going to go ahead and open up that seam, taking a seam ripper and just tearing out the stitches that I made in the original seam. And then this opens up the zipper. And this process is kind of slow, so I'm not going to show the whole thing, but yeah, basically just tear all the way down to the end of the zipper. Now I'm pressing the hem closed at the bottom of the shirt before I sew it. I want to make sure that it's nice and flat. This will make sewing it a whole lot easier. And now I'm just going along and sewing that seam closed. I guess it's not a seam, it's a hem, but you get the point. I'm sewing the hem closed. Now I'm going to go ahead and press the seam or the hem of the sleeves down before I sew those. Just do that to each sleeve. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew the hem that I made in the sleeves. And once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and clip the sleeves closed so I can sew them up. Sleeves used to be another thing that scared me about sewing, but now I don't really mind them. I actually kind of find them fun now. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the sleeves to the shirt. To do this, I have the shirt turned inside out and then the sleeve is turned right side out, and then I just put the sleeve into the armhole and then just sew along the inside of the sleeve all the way around the hole. And it's really not that difficult. You just gotta follow your seam allowance and continually flip the shirt. You might see it better in this next clip here. So So here I have the outside of the shirt, and to line it up and make sure that I have the sleeve lined up, I take the seam that's in like the armpit of the sleeve and then the seam that's in the armpit of the shirt, and then I just line those up. That's really the only match point that I have. The rest I just kind of line up the fabric and make sure that it all presses along nicely when I clip it. And then just go ahead and start closing up the sleeve hole or armhole, whatever you want to call it. It's almost just like sewing a straight line, except you just have to keep flipping the shirt as you sew. And that is it. Kind of looks like a ridiculous 90s tracksuit at the moment, but it's gonna look so much cooler when it gets the little gold details and all the armor and the cape and everything else that's gonna go along with this Destiny cosplay.
That's all for this episode and the second tutorial in this Hunter cosplay series. Now that the base of sewing is done, I'll be able to start making the armor. I'm going to start with the torso armor, so if you want to see how I go about making my own Guardian armor, be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next tutorial. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to tweet me at ZTV Goofing Off with the hashtag CreateYourCharacter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Goofing Off.